Welcome to Oracle tutorial. So today we are going to talk about indexes. Now this is a continuation of our last tutorial where we briefly started talking about indexes. So if you haven't gone through the last one, please go through that video so that you have pretty much a good idea about what we covered about indexes. So today let's take some examples of indexes. So as you see, this is a very simple index where we are creating an index on the employee table on the column department ID, and we are giving it as a name. Now after index is created, the way to use index is if you say where ID equal to, let's say, 2, then it is uses index. Now in a small table where we have 2-3 rows, you would not be able to see the difference. But let's say if you have 10,000 rows, you can see when you are using index, meaning when you are searching with an ID and you have an index on ID, it is much faster than, let's say, than maybe if you do, like, let's say, instead of that, where if you search with maybe employee name, which is fname equal to David, and if there is no index on fname, then you will see a lot slower. So that's pretty much the basics of index. Now the other things which you have to keep in mind is in which situation create an index, which situation to create index. So there is a term called selectivity. So what is selectivity is the difference distribution of values, meaning let's say if we have a column called gender and it is either it can have two values, let's say male or female, so M and F, and even if you have 10,001 million rows, even if you have male or female on the gender column as values, then it is not a good idea to create index, because you want to create an index where there are lots of different types of values, so that it is hard to search for that information quickly. So an ideal index column, so you, in this particular case, you would not like to create an index on gender. So an ideal candidate for index creation is ID, where employee ID, if or maybe employee, let's say, state. Let's say if you are searching with a parameter, let's say if you're searching with the employee ID or employee state, and that particular field or column has a good number of values. Now good number meaning it is a what percent. Let's say if your table has 100 rows, and if your, let's say, EMP ID has let's say 100 different values, then it is a good candidate. If employee state has, let's say, 50 type of values, then it's a good candidate. If employee state has only maybe 4 values or 5 values, then it may not be a good candidate. So those are the sort of judgment calls you have to make. So so what is selectivity? Selectivity is defined as the number of different types of values. So for example, the gender will have a low selectivity, but whereas the employee ID would be having a high selectivity. Okay, so that's about selectivity. Now the next thing is sometimes index, when you create, you can have also multiple columns index. For example, if you can create an index, so let's say here, go back to this, create index department ID on EMP. You can create an index on department ID and maybe EMP ID. So a combination of columns. Now for this particular one, it may not make sense to create, but what I'm trying to say is that you can create index on multiple columns. And the situations where you would use multiple column index is, let's say, when you write queries, queries always take both the columns to search with. Let's say if you're searching with EMP table and always you have or most of the times you have two columns instead of which is department ID and EMP ID, then you're better off creating a that's called a composite index with involving both the columns. So the other part is when you create an index, what happens? As I was telling you in the last video, that basically index is when internally Oracle creates another table to store really the index column value and the physical address of the row. So if you're creating a index on department IDs, so and if department ID is 1, it will store this. So every time you add record, it updates this index table. Now sometimes for whatever reason, if you are doing a lot of batch updates, you're updating a row or something, and then sometimes index may become a little bit stale, meaning it may not reflect the exact latest up-to-date representation of the table. So in that particular case, there is a command called compute statistics. What that means is that it rebuilds or it recalculates all the index data. So that means it updates this table with the latest information. So you can analyze the table. There is one syntax: analyze table, compute index, or you can fire something called an alter index with compute statistics. So let me give you the syntax. So this is the syntax: alter index, index name, rebuild, compute statistics. So what that means is that it rebuilds the statistics for this particular index. Means it updates this this index table. So if some new rows added, some address got changed or something, it updates those statistics. Now when you fire this one, analyze EMP, compute statistics, if EMP table has more than one index, it computes the statistics for all of them. Whereas this one, you are really doing for only one index. So that's pretty much the difference. So we talked about the creation of index, how we can use the index. Then there are other scenarios which you have to think is why use index. The reason we use index is to fetch the rows faster. So let's say if you have a table called of 1 million rows, and then instead of scanning the full table, you can quickly get to do an index search based on index, get the address, and then get the particular row. But for example, if you are doing searches where you are expecting a large number of rows, let's say you have your table at 10,000 rows and you are expecting your query to fetch maybe 3,000 rows. So that time it may not be a good idea to do an index based search, because you're going to do, think about it, you're going to fetch one row, go to the index table, get the one, get the match with the ID, and then get the address and go to the table and then fetch the row. So you have to do it for 3,000 times. Instead of that, it is better idea not to use the index, but rather just do a full table scan, meaning scanning really the entire table without really going through some sort of a index table lookup. So that's one of the reasons you might not want to use index. The other part is that other thing is you can also create function indexes, meaning, so let's say if you are select 6 from EMP where fname equal to David. So let's say if you are always, for a certain reason, you always want to search with the upper name. So you can create an index with upper fname, meaning create index on, you can say, upper fname. So you can create based on upper fname. But if you don't, and then if you use a if you create index with just fname and then you try to use upper, then it will not use the index. So whenever you want to use some sort of function in your query, you're better off using that function in the index itself. So that's for all for indexes. We'll discuss something else for our next video. Thank you.